The following is a production of Salt and Light Radio in Boise, Idaho. Kick off your work boots and pull up a boulder. It's time for Man Cave, discussing the issues that affect Catholic men in today's culture. Grab your favorite beverage, pick out a comfy spot around the campfire, and enjoy today's conversation with our two favorite cavemen, Pat King and Brian Howell.
Hi, I'm Pat King.
And I'm Brian Howell. Welcome back to the Man Cave, where we have an extra caveman joining us here today. In between Pat and I, this is none other than Eddie Trask. And I first met Eddie about a year and a half ago when Eddie had his book,
Yes,
Confession All, which is a great book. If you haven't read it, how do they get a hold of that?
Amazon. Confession All by Eddie Trask.
All right. Eddie also has a YouTube channel, and it's called Catholic RE.CON. Pat and I have actually both been a guest on your video podcast, so thanks for being a guest on ours.
Yeah, absolutely.
I got to admit, though, for the longest time, I didn't really, when he said RE.CON, I reconnaissance? What RE.CON? Then it's R-E period, C-O-N period, reverts, convert. I'm going like, oh my gosh. How long? It took me about a year to realize.
It took you a year.
Like, okay, I'm a little slow sometimes. You know?
Yeah. I've been doing it now for a year and a half, and it started not because I wanted to do it, believe it or not, to interview reverts and converts, but I felt convicted to do it, and I basically ran from that conviction, and I think it was
caught up to you in a closet, didn't it?
It did. It caught up to me in a closet, but I think it was Josh Dixon. Yeah, he was my first guest, who used to be on
The
Man
co-host.
Cave with Pat. He reached out, and that was kind of the moment where I felt, yes, he's going to be my first guest, and I'm going to commit to doing these once a week. So I think I'm 75 episodes in.
And you had this fancy studio.
Oh,
all the working, all the
absolutely.
trappings of high quality production.
Well funded,
right?
absolutely.
Well funded, yeah.
Yeah, it's
Well-
basically now me at the edge of my bed.
But it used to be in your master closet.
It started off in a closet, and in fact, Josh, he was in the closet with me.
So you're a couple sardines. Josh isn't a little guy, you know.
Well, the thing, I only had two guys in my closet. One was Josh, and the other was Mike Roberts. And from that, it's funny having those face-to-face conversations versus me just being on Zoom. I actually do enjoy those, but no one's going to be at the edge of my bed talking.
I'd rather be in Eddie's closet than in this dark, dank, cold cave that we're broadcasting from
We'll get
today,
you a new
but-
boulder. I'm sorry. You know,
Okay,
we'll get you
yeah.
a heated boulder.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah,
I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's a little. You know, you're an old guy. You know, and you know your tushin needs some cushion. Yeah.
So, out of those 75 episodes, you've actually interviewed quite a few popular, famous people.
Yeah.
Who are some that stand out?
Bear Wozniak.
Yeah, Bear Wozniak, a great interview. Trent Horn, that was more, I mean, his testimony was very short, and then we got into some apologetics, which was fun. And a number of people from the Journey Home, or from EWTN, Coming Home Network.
Coming Home
Gotcha.
Network.
Yeah, Matt Swaim, who's on EWTN, and
He
Ken
has a
Hensley.
radio show in the mornings.
He does, yeah, the morning sunrise
Sunrise
morning show. Anyway, a number of gentlemen from that line of work, and they mixed with, as I was told, Gary Machuda was another great interview. He had mentioned it's great that you have, yes, these popular, well-known Catholics as well as these local Idahoans, because no one would know their story otherwise.
Yeah.
So
Well, and this is kind of my thinking of why I wanted to do this men's ministry. It's been a call of mine, and if you go to earlier episodes, you'll hear how this show got started and stuff like that. Was that I made enough blunders and failings in my entire life, and left the church. And when I came back, the one thing that hurts the church the most is the lack of men in the church. And yes, there's some fathers. There's a lot of men in the church, but the councils, the Knights of Columbus councils, are small and dwindling, mostly older gentlemen. And to revitalize the church, I think it's very important that we bring men back, not just to go to church, but to serve, and a lot of them feel like they're not capable or not worthy, whatever their reasons were. I know that I would never have done this if I hadn't left the church and come back and found the fruits of the church's benefits by the Holy Spirit just said, look, you've got to do something. Your life means something. And if you've got the gift of gab or the ability to talk, and I encourage any other man out there, come down to Salt and Light. If you've got a men's ministry or something on your heart, you'd like to do a podcast or a video cast or anything to help encourage other men to strengthen their hearts, their confidence, their well-being. This is where Man Cave came from, and originally was, I'm an unworthy servant of the Lord, and He's using me to help other unworthy servants find their true calling or move forward or gain more strength to become saints.
Yeah.
I mean, quite honestly, that's the mission, is to become a saint. Of every human being, of every Christian, every Catholic out there, is to become a saint and to become a better person through testimonies.
Yep.
And so we're just not just another Catholic podcast or something like that. I'll tell you what, there's 12% of all the traffic on the internet is porn websites. Okay? I don't even know. I'd have to find out where.
I thought it'd be a higher number.
Well, that's 12% of all the internet.
Still.
Yeah.
I mean, that's massive.
It is massive. I no doubt about it. I'm not taking that away, but
Yeah, you were
it just as gross as
instinctually-
the internet
Yep.
is
Yeah.
anymore.
I
would
wonder
think
if
it'd
that
be
number
higher.
is, and I bet you that number is climbing daily.
Yeah.
And
Well,
if
that
they-
was a study that was like 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, just the social media aspect and
Right.
what is out there.
So
Yeah.
we're not just we are just another men's ministry or another podcast out there, but we may have guests or interviews or even messages that are worthy. Like today, one of the things I'd like to talk about, and in a future podcast, I'll get Eddie back on. We'll talk about pornography and both men and women's issues of pornography. I don't think we'll talk about it today because I think there's some Supreme Court decisions that have come out recently, and I think we should talk about those in reference to not so much that, yes, we're all glad that Roe has been turned down, but it been rescinded, but it doesn't end abortion. All it did was it stopped making it a federal issue to where everybody can contest a state law and go to the federal court and have it turned down because Roe was precedent. But Roe was never law to begin with. It was not decided by the Congress and the Senate, the House of Representatives, done with the way our Constitution set up. It was done through 7 men on the court in 1973 decided it should be a law. And that's not their job. They're deciding, they're supposed to decide whether the law is constitutional or not, but not whether they should create a law to make it constitutional. And so we're dealing with Roe, but we had this conversation earlier that part of, I grew up knowing that you can't legislate. I've heard this said many times. You can't legislate morality, but you can legislate immorality. And that's what things like Roe has done, has legislated the ability to be immoral. And 3 generations now have grown up with the idea that Roe was law and abortion was a right. And it's not. It's up to the states to decide and the people that live in those states. And they've got about 25 states that are going to have some form of restriction on abortion. And you've got some states that are going to, and maybe it's more than that, maybe like 35, 40. Then you got states that are going to actually let them transport people into their state to have an abortion. And so there's a lot of topics we'd like to discuss on that. So what do you say, guys?
Shoot, Brian? No, I'm just playing around. The first thing I want to mention, and we'll come back to what you just mentioned, but I was surprised by a person just a few days ago that sidled up and wanted to ask questions. She is not a Catholic, but she's a Christian, and she started asking me questions about my stance and the church's stance on these big issues. And as I would answer very definitively, she would have another question ready to go. And I came to realize that she was kind of undecided on the issue of abortion. And we kind of joked about, hey, I'm a man. I shouldn't, the world doesn't want me to have an opinion, or I'm not allowed to have an opinion.
You're not a birthing person.
Exactly.
You can't have a baby.
And I said, well, let's come from the angle of God, who God is as the creator. And so we took a different approach, but she kept, and I told her this, I said, I really respect the fact that we can have this conversation. That is what struck me. We talked about everything related to the dignity of life, how God can take the most horrible situation and bring a blessing from it, and how we should be willing to talk to women that have gone through not just the abortion and the trauma that can bring, but those that decide to conceive despite something that the world said. You know, they project. So many people project. That is, you know, you're going to have this, you're going to be reminded of this every time you see your baby. So I was just explaining, I wish we could talk about actual women that have gone through various things versus just one side. Through it all, I said, again, thank you for being so respectful. We can talk about this. You know where I stand. You know where the church stands. And ultimately, she was so surprised. And she basically said, do you believe everything the church says? And it was kind of this, I don't know, a little bit of a negative tone to it. And so I said, okay, so we are allowed to make prudential judgment on certain matters. But there are those matters that are so defined and so continuous back to the time of Christ about what a human is, what God wants for his children. So when that question is asked, sometimes it's like, okay, so you're oppressed, you know, by asking who is your authority. And so I unapologetically say, yes, the church stands very clearly. And I started talking about councils, affirming different doctrines. And she was really thinking about that. I said, yes, these things, they go back in time to the time of Christ. And so I said, so if that's not my authority, what is my authority? Right. And I said, and if you throw out forms of authority, guess who ultimately you still affirm an authority? Yourself. And I wasn't saying it like, we were just having this really civil conversation, but that moment I think was really huge, because just the ability to have a conversation calmly is
but
wow.
she was genuinely asking a question of wanting an answer.
True.
Some people want a question to argue.
No, she really did want to understand. Yeah,
because that's all I saw on my social media, and I was surprised at some of the people who were coming out. And I know that we had talked on Man Cave a couple of years ago when this whole term toxic masculinity came out. Well, I got to tell you, I saw a lot of toxic femininity come out over the weekend.
They're vicious.
It was very vicious, and basically just wishing all kinds of harm on men. But yeah, it's a tough situation. It's very controversial. But like you said, with this lady, she was willing to sit down and have a civil conversation. And that is a lost art form.
Yep.
You can't have civil conversations, especially on social media. No. That is a hit and run platform where I can say what I want and be as mean-spirited as I want, and then I can leave. You don't know who I am. We'll never see face to face.
And that's why you see less and less, I'll just briefly, less and less debate, formal debate,
or
discussion. Yeah. And people will turn down these opportunities. If you're so convinced of your position, please step out and argue for that position. And if you're not there, find someone that is articulate that can argue for your position. And if people continually turn these things down, it's not a strong case for saying that you have some truth.
Yeah.
Well, and so I posted something. I don't have any liberal friends on Facebook anymore. They've all unfriended me, defriended me, blocked me, whatever. And that's fine. I've never have blocked anybody, because I figure if I even though they say things that are totally absurd, they still have the right to say it.
Yeah.
And if they're going to post it, it ends up on my timeline, I'm going to say something back.
You're evangelizing.
And, I'm evangelizing. So I posted something on Facebook, and I said, if you are very, very upset about the Roe decision, you're most likely evil. And a friend of mine who thinks on the same level, I mean, very conservative views, have the same Christian principles, she kind of goes, well, I've got friends that I don't think, I mean, they have opposing views to mine, but I don't think they're liberal. And I said, I fully understand that. But I think we're at a point in our lives where you have good and evil. And if someone is good but has evil beliefs, they need to be called on it. And I don't think you do it by sugarcoating it. Sometimes you have to just slap them upside the head with a 2x4 and say, you're evil. And the reason why, and I say this, is because you catch them off guard. And they have to defend why they're not evil. They'll say, no, I'm not evil. Then why do you support abortion? That also, okay, so everyone says we should be loving and kind and have with respect and all that. Sometimes you have to put your foot down and stand your ground and say supporting abortion at any level is evil.
So let's talk about this post that I also saw a lot over the weekend is being pro-choice does not mean the same thing as being pro-abortion. Thoughts?
What? Okay.
I'm pro-choice. I just want the choice for life.
Well, the thing is
Did
if
they
you're
go
in the
further?
bedroom and you've committed the act, you've made your choice.
Yeah, you did. And
So what did they go further to explain?
Well, there was some other stuff in there. Was basically it's the right. It's going back to the freedom of choice. So it's like, well, you've taken away my right to choose now because we've overturned this Roe v. Wade situation, and so now I don't have the right to choose, which again is false. Because it's going back to the states, and certain states are still going to allow that.
And it's I don't have the right to choose after I've made a choice.
Well, I think their thing was, well, I would never have an abortion.
Oh,
but I wouldn't want
I stand for
to
all
take
these
that
other
choice away from other people.
Again, that's where that evil is, where you're allowing evil to take place, even though you wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
You're so righteous that you would never have an abortion.
I would never have one.
Yeah, I would never
But
have
I don't
one.
want to take that choice away from other
Right.
women.
So
that
you
was the
want to
point of that
encourage,
post.
you want them to have a choice when they make a bad mistake that they can just get out of it and call it, it's no big deal. But the thing is, you're allowing them to hurt their lives even more gravely. And I mean gravely.
Yeah.
Because when you've killed something, I mean, think about it. Anytime you've had an accident and someone gets hurt, even if it was not intended, whether it be on your bike or you bump into something, you have a tremendous feeling of, I've hurt someone.
Yeah.
There's a guilt
Well, you
level
should
there.
have that feeling.
You should have that feeling.
Well, and I think everyone does, but it's not going to be as a parent. So we've talked about things that you can just shove down.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, when I heard about people having these celebrations when they've aborted, that to me, now understanding what you can do mentally to go numb and justify any sin, if you are in that frame where you're fighting off these feelings, these intense feelings of guilt, not caused by religion, by the way, these are just part of the deal of being human. You're going to have these things, these deep convictions, but you can shove them down. Now, if they start to crop up, this is my theory. If they start to crop up, what can you do in defiance? You can proudly say, I am happy I did it.
So you're doubling down
You're
on
doubling
your sin.
down on your sin, and you are trying to stifle that voice that we all have, independent of religion, because people will say that's put on you by religion, or that guilt is just shoved into you, versus you were born, your Creator knows you. You know in your heart what's right and what's wrong, especially on these massive matters. And so now you're saying, I'm happy. Don't you understand? I'm happy, guys. Don't you understand? Yeah. You have to see how happy I am. Sorry. Yeah, did I offend you by that? I'm sorry.
My bodily autonomy, So, so that's I think Jesus kind of knew what he was talking about when he said pride was one of the 7 deadly sins. Pride, because we have to boast to protect our pride. By now we've said we're having an abortion. We're happy we had the abortion. My life is better because of it. And now because you've made that public statement, you have to defend it at all costs, which then what does pride do when your pride is boastful? You're killing your soul. You're killing yourself. You're killing your soul because you have no other choice than to, if you admit failure,
yep,
then you become canceled in this day and age because you went back on what you testified to as your shining moment.
Yeah.
And for people that live in the world of make-believe, like actors and actresses, stuff like that, or where they get their revenue, if they're an influencer on, and I don't use that term because I don't really understand. I understand it now, but it wasn't something like
you influence me. So you are an influencer.
Lord help us.
I hope it's in a good way, but no, influencers. I guess this podcast would be in a way an influence.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But there's good and bad. I always stayed on my face.
It's a confluence.
Evil is good and good is evil. This is where we've come down to where there is a definite separation.
Yeah.
But we've sugarcoated it so much that we can't define what is evil and good, and that's why I think I believe that we need to start putting our foot down and pointing out evil where evil is intrinsic and out there, and it's just been fluffed over with cotton candy.
And that was one part of my surprise in seeing some of these posts in social media when the ruling first came out, was the fact that a lot of these people I know as Catholic.
Yeah.
So these are poorly catechized Catholics who don't understand the church's point of view, the dogma, the doctrine that comes about life. Because we've heard people like Father Frank Pavone say, you can't be pro-choice or pro-abortion and be Catholic. It just boils down as simple as that.
Well, and truthfully, if there are a lot of people that aren't, like you said, not catechized, but they are on the television all the time, there is a drip, there is a constant drip that is not helping, but it's influencing their opinion so much to where the church is seen as non-loving if they don't affirm sin.
Right.
And we are so, that's not a profound statement. It's the opposite. If so many of us, I couldn't see it for the longest time. I viewed the church deep down inside as, whoa, what are they trying to control this, trying to control that? You view it as controlling when you are steeped in sin.
Yeah.
You view it as liberating when you have been liberated and you are saying, Holy Spirit, guide me into truth.
Yeah.
And that's when I saw, whoa, these are guardrails that you can't find anywhere else. You can't find this level of love. That's what true love is.
Right.
But when you're steeped in sin, then you just say, who's trying to take away my freedom, which is not freedom at all, it's slavery.
Well, and I love it when Mother Angelica comes on. She's passed, but they have these clips, and I hear them on Salt and Light because I listen to it all the time. Mother Angelica will say these things like, so some of these sisters want to be free of their frocks and all their garb because they want to be free to drive around and all that stuff. She says, sister, you don't know what freedom is. I'm more free than you are. You can keep your car and your fancy clothes and all that stuff. I'm more free because I'm liberated. She truly believed that her freedom came from the fact that she had a relationship with God, and everything else was just a mission of saving souls and being there for others. And it's right. That's very true, because when I came back to the church, I became free because I left the things that were actually imprisoning me, pornography websites, those lustful thoughts, all those actions that entrapped me, that made me do things that I never felt good about.
Yeah.
I was more snared by those traps than I've ever been as a Catholic. I am far more I have no problem saying I'm pro-life. I'm against abortion. You need to support life. I have no problem. I feel free when I put my foot down and say, That's wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the other thing that came up over the weekend was that the Catholic Church is all about the babies and that we don't care about the mothers.
I hate that.
So my point is, when I engage these people, is that if the federal government was going to give $500 million with a B,
Yes.
dollars to the
$500
abortion mill,
million every year.
to Planned Parenthood, how much good would that do if it went to local places like Sage Women's Center in the Magic Valley, Birthright of Boise, these different pregnancy resource centers that are here for the mother, for the child? But I think we, as the church, we need to step up our game, because now there's going to be 2,000 women every year here in the state of Idaho that are going to need they need care.
Absolutely. And it should be consistent. You're absolutely right. From womb to tomb, as they say, right?
So a couple things. Did you know that there are 4 times more life-affirming pregnancy centers than Planned Parenthood centers or abortion clinics? 4 to 5 times on average across the United States. Okay? Did you know that more black babies are killed in New York, the state of New York, than are born alive?
Wow.
Okay?
What?
That's true. And that's a statistic that I've read several times from several different sources. And so Planned Parenthood says, like the one in Boise just closed, okay? Because I think they saw the writing on the wall. They're setting up in Ontario, so all the funds are going there. But they get $500 million to do what? Kill babies. Even though they say they're not using taxpayer dollars. But some of them are going to close because they don't make enough money other than by providing abortion.
And that's what's so funny.
And they're supposed to be a medical health.
It's all about health care.
They have openly stated that only 3% of their business is attributed to abortions. And yet, when this decision came out, they were talking about how many facilities they're going to have to close and how these women won't have help.
And they still get $500 million.
If it's 3% of your business... That says something right there.
But another point that you made about the womb to tomb and the support, I'll tell you that so much money, so many resources have been used to fight the governments, the states, the federal government on Roe and the pro-life movement, that it's taken away resources from private, because most of the money for these health pregnancy centers that are good life-supporting ones come from private donations.
Yeah.
Most of them are not funded. They get no funds from the federal government. And so I think somehow we need to push for a law that says, okay, Planned Parenthood, half your money. If they took half of Planned Parenthood money away and gave it to all those other pregnancy centers, you know what $250 million could do for some of these? Yeah, you talk about providing care, not only just to keep the baby alive, but then provide diapers down the road and stuff like that. Could you imagine those kinds of resources on top of the donation? Yeah, there wouldn't be an issue. So yeah, it's put up or shut up.
Yep.
Those facts are there.
So the other thing is, you're talking about a culture that is going to respond.
Yep.
We're going to respond, but that's the reactive part. The proactive part is like the work that the CMLA, the Catholic Men's Leadership Alliance, does in Heroic Men, which is we've got to strengthen men so that the men can strengthen the family, so that they can strengthen the church, so they can strengthen, or it's even to help mold the culture. Because if everything is always reactive and the world is expecting you to, well, just care for all these people, of course we're going to care. But what is the root? Where are the men? Where are... And I think
this man cave show.
But it's so true that it seems so small. It's that ripple effect.
Absolutely.
Where if a man stays with his family, cares for his family,
and goes to church regularly,
and is willing to talk, and I'm speaking to myself, willing to speak to his children about sexual immorality, about the snares of the devil, about spiritual warfare, and at least train them versus I'm just going to drift and hopefully it'll all work out. And so what CMLA does, they equip men to start at home. Because if you can't get that right, then you will be reacting to, how did this happen? How do we have all these issues? Well, just go downstream and you'll see.
So one of our mutual friends, Travis Wingo, gave me a copy of a book called No Man Left Behind, and there is a Catholic edition of this book. But talking about what you had just said about proactive, reactive, there's a story in this book I found fascinating, kind of the Moses story. So these babies are floating down the river, and first of all, it might just be one a day. And so they try to set up some machine or
To catch them?
to catch the babies, and then as time goes on, there's more and more babies floating down the river. But the thing is instead of wasting all this time and effort and resource trying to save
Figure
the
out how to
babies,
catch the babies.
nobody went upstream to see why the babies were floating down the river in the first place.
Wow.
So it goes back to what you're saying is, what is the root problem of this issue, and let's tackle it at its source rather than be reactive.
Well, exactly. And so this is why it's so important to teach your kids before they're men that they have a duty, a responsibility, and an obligation to be faithful, to be loyal, to be gentlemen, to be manly, and to honor women, and know that whatever they do, there's consequences either way.
Yep.
Okay, either way, whether they want to be sexually active or respectful and wait till marriage, there's still consequences to a lack of manhood. Okay, and so this is why men, if you're out there and you're watching this, listening to this, you have a duty, whether you've got kids now or getting married, or you're an adult man that's not married yet, you have to know in the forefront that your choices have to include your proper education of your future men, because you're the training ground, you're the teacher, you're the domestic priest in your family.
I would also add that I've had this thought, and I know many other men have this thought, like you find yourself at the age of 35 or 45 or 55 and you say, well, it's gone. I made my decisions.
I
the
made my bed.
consequences are there.
Yeah.
There are little things that you could do, even with your grandchildren, that will make an impact for future generations. So there is I think that that's convenient. If you were a victim, and we play this game like I'm a victim, and you somehow come out of that, but then you decide not to do anything about it, it's almost like going
Turn
back
in your man
to that
card,
state.
give up your man card.
It's like going back in time, and I've had to wrestle against that, and you realize, wow, that's still just selfish for me to say there's nothing that I can now do. I'm just going to draw inward.
Yeah.
That's not going to be
so
helpful.
In other words, your silence is approval of the bad actions.
Yeah, we've got to, especially when you have such a tremendous gift, all of us, God's grace has given us this second chance, really, to speak and to try to make things better. Not to say, like you mentioned at the beginning, you're not here saying, I've got the answers. There's part of that where you're saying, I've matured, I've learned things, but you're also saying, here's what I've done. Don't do that.
Don't
here's
step
what
on
will
that
become
mine.
of it.
It's bad, dude.
And
It's
even if one man hears that message,
Yeah.
that's one man that hears that message that wouldn't otherwise. So
well, and that one man will then now treat and teach another man not to do what we've done. It's reciprocal. It's like throwing a pebble in the water, calm water. You see a ripple, and then it just keeps. The ripples keep going until it reaches its boundaries, and the ripples get bigger and more inclusive. You know, when I was a young man and in a business, it said your sphere of influence. There is a crowd of men or people that respect you, that listen to you, and you need to know. I was in 7th grade. I was pulled aside. I was a troublemaker in class, and I had this PE coach, Mr. Sheen, and 7th or 8th grade. He set me and another troublemaker aside. We kind of butted heads. And now we're good friends to this day. But we butted heads, and he sat us aside. The class was out doing their thing, and he pulls us in and says, you two are leaders. People are going to follow you no matter which way you go. You can either go down the right road or you can go down the wrong road. And just remember, people are going to, men, boys, people are going to follow you. Whatever road you take, you're going to take them down that road. Now, let me tell you something. As I think I was 13, 14-year-old guy, that was a heavy message for me to hear that, unbeknownst to me, I mean, I really thought I was just me. I didn't know I had any kind of influence. But when I look back, I saw 20 or 30 guys kind of following me, doing what I was doing, wanted to be like me because I was vocal, I was a leader, I was popular that I didn't know, and I had to be very conscientious. And I'm glad that man it weighed on me.
Yeah.
But to this very day, I've looked back at the ones that followed me down, and I chose to go down a better path. Now, I'm not saying as an adult I actually stayed that course, but there was less people following me. But in high school and school,
Yeah.
there are people that are followers. There are leaders, and there are natural leaders and natural followers. My friend, Mark, went down the path of, kind of wild and woolly, and you could see the ones that went down his path and the ones that got into drugs or in jail or died. And I look back and I see some of the ones that followed me kind of had this, because I chose that path of more righteous living, more righteous decisions. And a lot of those guys have good jobs. I mean, it's amazing the influence, the impact that had on me. And I think about that all the time. And this is what happens in the final judgment is that exact same thing. When God looks back at your history and the things you did and how you led people astray or how you helped them become better saints or better people themselves, that's something so important that when I was raising my kids, even though I was a non-denominational churchgoer, I wasn't in a Catholic church, I still believe that my children, I would rather spend the money in their youth for a Christian education with principles and values taught to them in their elementary, middle school, and high school years. It was so important. I'd rather spend the money on them now to get them in that right mode. And hopefully I would then send them on a course that if they went to college, they had principles ingrained to them.
Yeah.
Because what happens is we let them go to public school and let them deal with all those social things. And they try to fight it. You don't know what they're always doing. You kind of think that they're on the right page, but kids aren't going to tell mom and dad that they're out there smoking cigarettes in the back or pot or anything like that. They're going to try to be the good little expectation that mom and dad have of them, their vision. So my kids went to a Christian school, and I look at their lives today, and wow, I'm so proud and so happy that I did that. Because if I just put them in the public world and then try to send them to college and then try to correct them or lead them, I don't think I mean, not saying my kids wouldn't have been good, but all I know is that the results are in that most of the kids that went to that school, a Christian school, have decent, healthy lives. And I think it's important that we educate them young when we have the power of influence, because they have to do what we tell them. They live under our roof. It's my way or the highway.
Oh yeah, I just mentioned this to a woman.
Did I say? Can you cut that out?
I just interviewed a woman yesterday, and we were agreeing. Okay, people will criticize Christianity and say, "Well, yeah, of course you're following that. You were indoctrinated at an early age," and then you just take that away. Okay, there's no Christianity. Oh, indoctrination as you deem it, that goes away. Someone's teaching you.
Right.
And there is some narrative. Which authority is going to form your child? Is that formation going to lead to a child that cares about others? Has empathy, understands that we're all equal? Or are you going to have someone that is formed by, I guess, I think I'm not trying to generalize, but there's also this formation of rebellion. And clearly you can't escape, just like I was saying earlier about, okay, you end up being your own authority. You can't escape authority, ultimately. And you can't escape the fact that you will be formed by one narrative or another. No one says, hey, I just let my child be free and they'll discover on their own what it means to be human. What
Doesn't
a load of garbage. That's impossible.
Why do you think there's so much confusion out
everywhere?
There?
So now you can understand the Christian worldview versus an atheistic worldview and other worldviews and how they play into the lives of children.
Because we're a product of our environment.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we've talked about this and other topics for enough for this episode. And maybe if we can snag you and get you on another episode in the future.
We're stuck with you again?
I hope so.
We can talk about your lawn care.
Yeah. Oh. So you want to look for a fertilizer that's 16, 16, 16 with iron. That's all I know.
I said
triple 15 with iron.
I said
balanced. And your
balance.
sprinkler head should be at least 3 inches above the ground. And when you find those bugs, you eat them.
Okay.
I learned everything that you need to know about
I need to give you a hands-on
care.
lesson. You missed the texting. I guess didn't come across.
And then when all else fails, rip out all the sod and just throw down a bunch of bark.
That sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Great
Cover
advice.
it with pavement.
Yeah.
All right. As we do with every episode, we end with the St. Michael the Archangel prayer. So in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. St. Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who prowl about the world seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. Until next time, for Pat King, our guest Eddie Trask, and myself, Brian Howell, have a great week, and we'll see you next Wednesday.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Man Cave, a weekly podcast discussing the issues that affect Catholic men in today's culture. A production of Salt and Light Radio in Boise, Idaho. To learn more about our ministry, please visit our website, saltandlightradio.com.